Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Johnston. I'm the Vertebrate Paleontology Fossil Preparator and Technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology. Now, a lot of museums are famous for certain key flagship specimens. Think Sue the T-Rex at the Field Museum, think the Archaeopteryx at the Berlin Museum, and here at the MCZ, we're particularly fond of our Kronosaurus. So I knew that our horrible beast need to make an appearance himself. But I can't do the entire video here, very sadly, and I'm gonna have to get back to the rest of the crew. So, if you'll join me back at our normal location.
Hi, everyone. We're back in our normal location now.
Welcome.
Wow, it took you so long to get back from inside the Kronosaurus to right here.
I almost certainly changed clothes and everything. It was so long.
Scott just walking down the street in Cambridge, stripping out of one outfit, putting another outfit back on. Like a character from a Bourne movie.
Flying past the Cambridge Common with people just...
Yeah. That's more like Mission Impossible.
Cambridge,
right?
I thought you lived
It's a
in
bit more
Harvard,
Mission
USA.
Impossible, yeah. Right. So, before we get further into Kronosaurus than Scott's already been today, Ayo.
It's perverse.
I'm Dr. James Napoli. I'm a research instructor in the Department of Anatomical Sciences at the Renaissance School of Medicine of Stony Brook University, where I teach human anatomy to health sciences students.
Does that mean you're a paleontologist?
Yes,
In fact,
it still does. Thank you. This is a good new bit for us to have. I am still a paleontologist.
We do
Many of
get
my colleagues
comments.
are paleontologists too. Yeah, no, we do. My family wants to know. Yeah, I'm still a paleontologist.
Hello, my name is Amelia Zilo. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History, where I am also a paleontologist. Somehow.
Hi, my name is Alex Rubenstahl. I'm a PhD candidate at Yale University, and I'm also a paleontologist.
good day. My name is Dalton Meyer, and I'm also a paleontologist. In particular, the kind that is a PhD candidate at Yale University. And together,
We're the Skeleton Crew!
Yeah, we sure are. Well, anyway,
And we're coming to you live in the pre-recorded way.
yes.
we are alive.
No, these were... Now, I don't want to paint with a large brush here, but all of the good-looking marine reptiles are DLC species, right?
Well,
No, the Ichthyosaurus is base. I like that one.
technically speaking, the Attenborosaurus isn't a DLC. It was a pre-order. Or, no, it was a deluxe upgrade.
The
I
deluxe
see.
edition.
All right, so Kronosaurus. He's got a name. What does it mean?
It means Kronosaurus. Wouldn't you know?
And it's
so it's
named
named-
after...
Which is named after the Titan Kronos of Greek mythology.
And James's eventual fate.
Was he slain by his son?
Consumed by his father.
But it also it has a species epithet too, which is even more straightforward.
From Queensland.
Queenslandicus. That sure is.
I wonder what city or province or territory or whatever they call it down there they're referring to. So, Scott,
Yes,
you work at a university museum.
I do indeed.
Notably, here's my little personal story. As an annoying, overachieving child, I always wanted to attend Yale University as an undergraduate because I thought they had the best university museum, which they do.
Yes,
I think
they do. That's
the
correct.
Peabody is perhaps the best university museum in the world.
I don't know. Have you seen Michigan's?
No.
Peabody doesn't have anything that I made in it.
True.
I like the old man look over glasses, shaky hand that accompanied
wagging
that.
his finger. This is not a knock on any other university museum. It's just that the Peabody is...
Peabody's great.
The Peabody's fantastic.
Yes.
But then, as an annoying overachieving child, I saw a picture of the hall. What do you call it? The Great Hall or where the Kronosaurus is at Harvard.
Romer Hall.
Of the Romer Hall. All right, so then, as an annoying overachieving child, I saw a picture of the Romer Hall at the Harvard University Museum of Comparative Zoology. And in particular, I saw this amazing Kronosaurus mounted skeleton. Now, I had never been to that museum, but I'd been to the Peabody, and I said, that's a lot cooler than anything I saw at the Peabody. And so then I decided that I wanted to attend Harvard as an undergraduate. And then I didn't get in to there or to Yale. And so I had to do what everybody who doesn't get into Harvard or Yale, but is an annoying overachieving child does, which is go to Brown.
Can we clip the Simpsons joke where Lisa has a nightmare after she got a B and she has to go to Brown?
Nasty business, that, Zero. Naturally, Harvard's doors are now closed to you, but I'll pass your file along to Brown.
Heck of a school.
No, not Brown.
This is all to say, while I didn't get to go to Harvard as a student, you did get to go to Harvard as a person who makes a salary.
I did. They hired me.
They did. And and that may be better because instead of paying Harvard many thousands of dollars, Harvard pays you many thousands of dollars.
They do indeed.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah, that's based.
And you got to, many years later, come and visit and see our Kronosaurus in person.
I did. I mean, I've seen it a couple of times. It's cool. It's a really cool specimen. Do you have thoughts about it?
Oh, so many thoughts. So many thoughts.
Thank you. We eventually got there.
We did. So before we get to the MCZ's Kronosaurus, which is actually, for those of you who didn't pick up on it beforehand, it is just the MCZ's logo. It is on everything. It is in my email signature. It is everywhere. We love our Kronosaurus. Our problematic king, Kronosaurus. It is very problematic, and we will get to that. But before we even get there, let's go on a stroll through some of the history of study of Kronosaurus. And that takes us back all the way to the year 1899, when the first specimen of Kronosaurus was found by a Mr. Andrew Comby and was sent to the Queensland Museum. This is QMF1609. Now, we don't know where this specimen was actually found, but we know that Crombie lived in Howenden, which I'm pretty sure is how that's pronounced, so we're pretty sure it came from there. So it's pretty beat to crap. The director of the Queensland Museum at the time actually thought that this was he mentioned in a letter that this might have been an odd example of Ichthyosaurus australis, which is now given the also problematic name of Platyduranus australis, because Platyduranus is kind of a weird wastebasket, or at least historical wastebasket ichthyosaur taxon. But noted that it had large and thecodont teeth, which are, for those of you unaware, teeth in individual sockets, which are strange for ichthyosaurs. Now, in 1924, DeVee's successor, Albert Longman, redescribed the fossil. Or actually, sorry, he didn't redescribe it. He described it properly for the first time, because DeVee only mentioned this in a letter. So he described it for the first time and was actually shockingly able to deduce that this was a section of the lower jaw of a giant pliosaur right in front of the mandibular symphysis. And we have a cast of this holotype. It is pretty scrappy, and it's not huge. It's like this big. The way that he was able to figure out that this is actually a Kronosaur, a large pliosaur, is quite remarkable. And he was the one who named it Kronosaurus queenslandicus. In the years since, more fragmentary remains were found around Australia, most notably a partial skull, which is QMF2446, which, according to some different sources I found, is actually 2 chunks of the skull, but only one of them ever gets figured, which is this chunk here, which is the middle part of the skull, including some the front part of the orbits and the nares. And the other chunk of the skull also includes the occipital condyle and the back of the brain case. So, by the late 1920s, we had at least some idea of what the skull of Kronosaurus might have looked like, especially given that some other pliosaurs were known at the time. Not that many, though. Kronosaurus was the third or fourth of the short-necked pliosaurs that was actually described. First one, obviously, being Pliosaurus in the 1840s, and then Brachicinius from Kansas, and Eiectus, and then Kronosaurus. But we kind of didn't know that much about these short-necked pliosaurs at the time. Some of the other longer-necked pliosaurs, like we mentioned with Attenborosaurus, had been known. But yeah, so as we enter the 30s, in comes the Harvard Australian expedition, which was a 6-man expedition that was proposed because the Harvard's collections were lacking Australian specimens. Specifically, they were looking for... Yes, James?
Just give us your specimens.
Give us your specimens.
We're lacking in them.
We have organized an expedition. We require your specimens.
Specifically, according to this book, The Rarest of the Rare, that I actually bought for this episode, which is actually it's a really, really cool book. I've been meaning to get a copy for a while. That's a bunch of stories about all of the various specimens in Harvard's collection. So it's a really rad book. And so they were specifically looking for specimens of kangaroo, wombat, and Tasmanian devil. But while they did succeed in collecting very many specimens during their expedition, a lot of those would pale in comparison to what eventually became the flagship of not just the expedition, but the whole university. So this 6-man expedition included some a coleopterist, a couple zoologists, a physician, an entomologist, and the star of our show, William Chevelle, who's the associate curator of invertebrate paleontology, and was finishing his PhD. He was 25.
Imagine.
It was crazy, right?
Let's go. Yeah, yep.
So
that's great.
This expedition was kind of conducted in a way that is strange for modern expeditions, in that it seemed like everybody showed up there at the same time and then just kind of stuck together loosely for a little bit, and then over the 2 years of the expedition just dispersed and never really saw each other again. At least on the expedition. A bunch of people went home early. One of the last people, the second to last person to actually leave was the physician, because the zoologist and Chevelle were going to be collecting in such incredibly disparate parts of Australia that he's like, I can't look after both of you. I'm going home. May God have mercy on your souls. But in the last year of the 31 to 32 expedition, Chevelle gets named as the expedition lead, and he starts going around all of Australia looking for fossils and making friends along the way. Genuinely, a big part of this expedition was recruiting locals and befriending locals to help learn about other fossils and get some hands in excavating. And notably, when the 1932 portion of the expedition started, Cheville contacted the Queensland Museum and invited them to participate in the expedition. Now, Longman was still the director of the Queensland Museum at the time, and unfortunately, due to either lack of funds or lack of interest on the part of the state government, the request was denied. And that is according to the 1986 memoirs of the Queensland Museum. But Longman gave the expedition every assistance, including storing specimens as they were sent to him and fixing collecting permits.
Oh.
Cool.
He really helped out. It seemed like and from the correspondence that I was able to see between them and some of Cheville's writing, they seem to be on very good terms. Now, the first specimen of note, or at least the first paleontological specimen of note, because boy, Cheville documented a lot of other really cool specimens, but they just weren't paleontological ones, was MCZ 1284, which is one of my favorite fossils in our collection. And that scale bar is 50 centimeters. This thing is
Jesus Christ.
Huge.
That's a big boy.
It's gigantic.
We love it, folks.
This thing is the very, very tip of the snout of a Kronosaurus. And it is gigantic. It's about this big. And it's massive. So it's so heavy. The teeth are all snarled and interlocked together. It's such a cool fossil. James, I remember specifically showing this to you when you came to visit.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we had a conversation about how, like, these things are genuine, actual monsters.
They're far too large.
Far too large.
Those interlocking teeth are also an important clue to its lifestyle.
Oh, they are indeed. They are indeed. So, this is a phenomenal specimen already. But it got even cooler when Cheville met up with a rancher by the name of Ralph William Halsam Thomas, who's a sheep rancher in the area of Army Downs. Yeah, he's got 4 names. It's a lot. So years before the expedition came around, he had been noticing something odd protruding from the rocks of his horse paddock. And when Cheville was exploring around, meeting the locals looking for fossils, Thomas approached him and was like, "Hey, I got some weird stuff that's eroding out of my farm. You want to go take a look at it?" So he was like, "Yeah, sure." So he goes over, and it's an articulated series of vertebrae of a complete, well, the most complete Kronosaurus known at the time, that were preserved in a linear series of 15 limestone nodules, with only the first being displaced and overturned. And that's from Romer's paper on mounting the plesiosaur that we will get to later, because that's a paper. He says some things in there. So being in this insanely hard limestone and being just gigantic, these guys had to get some help. Namely, they enlisted the help of a local British expat. He was a sergeant major with explosives experience from his time in the army, who is only ever referred to in every publication I have seen by his local nickname, the Maniac.
That's great.
The Maniac.
Which he was given because allegedly he killed a man. So
allegedly.
When I learned about this, I spent some time today chatting with the good folks in Harvard's Erstmeyer Library's special collections, trying to going through a bunch of Cheville's old field notes from the expedition and correspondence from this time to see if there is any more information about the Maniac.
I would like information about the
information.
Maniac.
Please.
I can find
I do not feel safe not having
Nothing.
information about the main.
Wait, so we don't know anything about this guy?
all we know is he was a British expat who was
A murderer.
probably a sergeant major. I'm not even sure. I've only found one reference to his specific rank.
Huh.
Everywhere Ollie always mentions that he had some sort of military experience and a background in explosives, and he was the one who Cheville looked at and was like, "Yeah, Mr. the Maniac, or is that your father? Can you help me dynamite this incredible specimen out of this sheep farmer's land?" And he was like, "Absolutely."
This looks like a job for the Maniac.
This is a Sunny joke. This is almost.
Right?
I'm losing my mind. The wrestler they hire is
Oh
the
my God,
Maniac.
yeah.
They call him Mr. the Maniac.
I'm gonna say
It's actually the same guy.
there
He
there
grumbles
is
to himself.
There is.
Yeah,
I bet it
love
really
that.
was the same guy. I bet he also grumbled to himself. And also, so one of the things as well is a lot of the papers that refer to the Maniac also refer to him just as a British migrant, which seems like they found a dude living on the side of the road who was known as the Maniac, who apparently knew how to blow shit up. And they were like,
Well,
"That's my man.
That's so
That's the
cool.
guy right there."
that's my Maniac.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's an insane story. But yeah, so according to the 1933 MCZ annual report, the excavation took about 6 weeks. And I say about 6 weeks because it seems like, also from reading through his publications, his correspondence and field notes and everything, I have to just work on the assumption that Cheville did not think that this was particularly cool. Because
He didn't think the Maniac was cool.
the Maniac or the Kronosaurus, neither of them. Because like in the annual report, this is all that is said about he wrote up a whole section about the expedition, and this is all that is said that mentions Kronosaurus. "We worked a few weeks in the Howenden district, where we were particularly aided by Mr. W. Charles and Mr. Joseph Wright. One of these men might be the Maniac. I don't know. It's not said. Unclear.
So, I think W. Charles has to
Maybe
be the
W.
Maniac.
Charles.
I love when people go by like a first initial and then a different name.
Oh, it's good. Yeah.
W Maniac.
W. Charles Maniac.
Common Maniac W. By the middle of June, we had gone on to Richmond, in which neighborhood we were occupied for over 6 weeks. Among the finds here was a fairly complete skeleton of a large pliosaur, evidently Kronosaurus. Because of the drought, an attempt to obtain some examples of a river crocodile, crocodiles, John Stoney led us to it. And he has like the rest of the paragraph is about this trek to try to shoot a freshwater crocodile. He just like, evidently we found a Kronosaur. Anyways, it's never mentioned ever again. It's ridiculous.
You said, hold on, you said this guy was an entomologist?
No. This
Or
guy
no?
this guy was a paleontologist.
Okay. Who was an entomologist? Am I making things up?
The original expedition lead was an entomologist,
Okay.
but he left after like a year and
Found all the bugs.
knighted Cheville to be the expedition leader going forward. So anyways, they pack up all of these blocks. They apparently they somehow get them into the back of a Ford truck and drive them to the nearest, and it does specifically say that they were barely able to get him to the nearest railway junction. And this was a baffling sentence that I also had to ask a bunch of my friends about. And I quote, "The blocks were shipped off to Harvard, wrapped in end of sale bloody wool, which so horrified the director of the Museum of Comparative Zoology, Thomas Barber, that he made Cheville wash every enormous block with disinfectant for fear of anthrax." So I enlisted the help of our MCZ fiber arts group of like, you guys are natural history people that also know fiber arts things.
Sorry, what's the fiber art?
So it's like knitting, crocheting, all of that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So it was like, what the hell does that mean? I tried to look up what end of sale bloody wool was, and all I ever got was either comments talking about how wool can sometimes have blood on it when you shear a sheep improperly, or a lot of stuff about PETA saying that all wool is bloody.
That's funny.
So the closest that I was able to get, it seems like no one has any idea what the hell they meant by this. But the closest that
what did Barbara mean by this?
What did George mean by this?
What did the Maniac mean by this?
So
I thought you guys weren't gonna do it. There was enough of a pause because this has been, dear viewer, the bit for the past month has been, what did George mean by that? Every possible time that one of these guys can say that, they will. And so the fact that a full second had elapsed, I was hopeful that I'd escape.
That pause was for comedic effect.
No, I think we were all just individually thinking of what name we were going to sub in for George. We each said
really were.
That's
I
exactly what it was.
So what the
Does
best
George
guess,
mean by this?
The best guess that I have of what George meant by this
Thank
is that this comes from one of my coworkers, Alana, that informed me that one of the grading systems for wool from the 1800s to like the 1950s was a blood grade system that was essentially grading the fineness of the wool based on the genetic amount of how much merino line was kept in the sheep. So it could be that this was very nice merino sheep wool that these were wrapped in for their transit and brought back to Harvard. And Barber, having no idea what the grading system was like, you brought me bloody wool. You're scrubbing every single one of these before I let them in the building, which I think is hilarious and entirely plausible.
That would be funny.
It's insane, especially also because the final shipment was 86 cases that weighed all told approximately 6 tons.
Jesus Christ.
And that is, to do my best Amelia impression there, that is taken from Seas of Kansas, or Oceans of Kansas.
That was supposed to be an impression?
Because you
always
the book.
reference Oceans of Kansas.
I haven't referenced that, but okay.
I got it, Scott. I liked it.
I got it.
So, okay. Fossils finally get back to Massachusetts and they get a thorough cleaning. 2 years after the fossils arrived at Harvard, the skull had been prepped by Dr. Theodore White, because we do not do Preparator erasure here.
I thought you were going to say we don't do Theodore wrong.
No, well, we'll get to some... We'll get to some Preparator wrongs here. But so, Theodore White then wrote the first description of the skull of Kronosaurus. And here it is figured of what we have. And I went up to our display and checked, and yeah, that seems to just kind of match up with what we have on display. So the first thing that was ever put on display of Kronosaurus at Harvard was just a skull.
Oh my God.
Huh.
Oh, it's so big.
It's so big. It's so big. It's huge.
That looks smooth.
Holy smokes.
And it's very smooth. It looks very different from what we have now. So we got all this Kronosaurus stuff. We have a skull on display. Very neat. So then, as is tradition in paleontology, unfortunately frequently, the postcrania were stored in the basement of the MCZ and untouched for about 15 years.
As is customary.
Because the MCZ...
As was the style at the time.
As was the style at the time. So because the MCZ lacked the funds and the space to prep them. So, it makes sense, but it's sad when it happens. But, enter our next player here.
A new challenger.
A new challenger approaches, and his name is Godfrey Lowell Cabot. Harvard alum, the founder of the Cabot Corporation, which was a specialty chemical and materials manufacturer, philanthropist, and most importantly for this story, sea serpent fanboy.
Huh.
Awesome. Cool.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is in 1817, his great-grandfather, the so-called Merchant Prince of Boston, observed the infamous Gloucester sea serpent.
That kicks ass. That's so
awesome.
cool.
And wrote about this sighting and got it published. And ever since then, it became part of of that family lore. Especially when in 1918, his daughter and son-in-law, so Cabot's grandparents, saw what they reported to be the same creature off Nattet. This next bit is from a booklet called About the Exhibits of the Museum of Comparative Zoology. And I quote, Godfrey Cabot used to question Alfred Romer of the museum about reports of sea serpents. This guy was just obsessed from his past.
So cool.
One day, it occurred to Dr. Romer to tell Mr. Cabot about the skeleton in the museum's closet. Cabot asked how much a restoration would cost. Romer, pulling a figure out of the mustier, replied, "Oh, about 10,000." Cabot promptly said to check.
Show me your sea monster. I'll take any amount.
So, this equates to about $114,000 in today's money. This guy was sea monsters crazy. It's insane. Well, he didn't fleece them. It was
Did it actually cost that much?
We'll get to that. So from accounts that I found, it seems like this was just a genuine conversation and Romer had no intention of asking for this money. That they were just chatting. And it seems like, especially from how this is written, it seems like this is something that Cabot did all the time, of like anytime there was a new sea serpent sighting or anything or a weird thing washed up on the beach, he would either call or just show up at the MCZ and just go, just knock, knock, knock. Hey, Al, so how about that new sea serpent, huh? What can you tell me about that new sea serpent? And then one of these days, Romer was just like, hey, you know what? We have a sea serpent in the basement. Go check it out. And showed him the blocks of the Kronosaurus. And he was like, oh my God, so these things are just sitting here unprepped? He's like, yeah, we just kind of don't have the funds for it. And it's like kind of a nightmare that they're just sitting here. He's like, well, how much would it cost to like prep something like this? And he was like, I don't know, maybe like 10K. And then like 2 days later, a check for 10K just shows up in the mail.
You know, it's good to have friends like Cabot.
Yeah. Which again is about $114,000 in today's money. I mean,
those sea serpent like crypto guys were kind of like the wealthy UFO enthusiasts of their day.
This is the start of what I'm calling the Plasterosaurus arc, which is the mounting of the Harvard Kronosaurus. Which,
Scott.
Yeah?
Would you say it's a filler arc?
There was a lot of filler happening. In fact, way too much filler.
Well, if we're going to talk about Plasterosaurus, what better place to do it than with the Plasterosaurus in question? So, as that derogatory nickname might clue you in, our guy here has a bit of a negative reputation, mainly of mostly being indecipherable, reconstructed plaster nonsense. And I can see why someone would think that when they've looked at it from the other side of the glass or heard the stories about how all of these bones were covered up and more were added. And I was actually personally pretty surprised when me and my collections manager, Christina Bird, came in here to do an exhibit evaluation on this guy, got up close and personal with the specimen, and were able to pretty easily see that there's quite a bit of exposed bone actually present. that some of these vertebrae have surface bone that is visible, and it's very clearly distinguishable from the plaster around it. And some entirely fabricated elements are pretty easy to tell as well. And you can see the brush strokes and the surface texturing that was done to this plaster element of the pelvis to make it more appear like it's real bone. And there are even elements on some of the larger bones, like this femur here, that are able to be differentiated if you get up close and you really look. There's some surface bone here that is exposed, and there's surface bone here that is exposed, along with some pretty obvious weathered bone on these flipper elements here. So once you get up close and look, you can actually tell quite a bit of what's real and what isn't. And this is also in conjunction with Al Romer's publication on the mountain of Kronosaurus, in which he actually illustrates what elements of the pelvis and the pectoral girdle were reconstructed to put them on display. Now, one of the more curious things that we discovered in our evaluation of our big beast here is the front flipper. In Cheville's notes, and corroborated by Romer's paper on the mountain of Kronosaurus, it is specifically mentioned that no front limb material was found, but both of the hind limbs were found. And I had just assumed that this entire thing was reconstructed so they could give the illusion of what the entire animal looked like. But to my shock and slight dismay, it seems like there is quite a bit of original material in this foreflipper. There's even a bit on the humerus here, and a major part on the back here, as well as some of the more distal flipper elements. So we haven't figured this out yet, but I am pretty sure that this means that this is not actually the forelimb of Kronosaurus. This is probably the right hind limb that was coated in plaster and shaped to look like what we would expect a humerus to look like, which is wild to me. And these more distal elements are probably just hind right flipper elements that were, again, put in some plaster and sculpted to look like they would be forelimb elements. And I mean, all in all, in situ and in context of the rest of the mount, it looks pretty good. It definitely had me fooled when I was on the other side of the glass. One other fun story that I personally very much love regarding our Kronosaurus has to do with why I chose to wear red today. And that is not necessarily because, oh, it's Harvard Crimson and everything. It really has to do with one of my long ago predecessors, a fossil preparator at Harvard by the name of Constance Kite. Now, she was hired by the MCZ in 1956 or 57 and worked as a fossil preparator here. Unfortunately, not in the same lab that I worked at. We've moved museums a bit since. But when the Kronosaurus was finally finished and put on display in 1959, Romer had hired some photographers to come out and do a photo shoot with our photogenic body here. And while I don't know this exactly, I wouldn't be surprised if after the photographers had set up and Romer was looking over the specimen, he kind of had a couple realizations. Number one is that if you shoot this thing just by itself, it kind of gets lost, and you don't really have a good sense of scale of absolutely how gigantic this monster really was. So we needed something to ground us, give us a human perspective, and help the viewer see how big this animal really was. And two, it's not really colorful. It's kind of just a big black and white skeleton that's on a slate blue-gray background. So Romer had an idea. He called up Constance, who was in the prep lab at the time, and said, "Hey, Constance, do you have a red dress?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I do." He said, "Cool, run home and get it." So she ran home, got her red dress, came back, and was the model for our photograph of the Kronosaurus. And even many years later, she came back and was able to recreate her famous photo from that postcard. And so, ever since, whenever I work on the Kronosaurus, I always make sure to wear my red.
So, one of the things that is most striking about the Harvard Kronosaurus is it's huge. It's so big. It is about 43, 44 feet long.
That's so
It's
cool.
gigantic. In fact, it's way bigger than it should be. And that is attributed to that filler. So, as I mentioned earlier, a week ago when I started this segment, we didn't know that much about pliosaurs when Kronosaurus was first discovered. So, after the excavation of MCZ 1285, and when it was first thought to be put on exhibit, in looking through what they had, Romer assumed that a lot of pieces were missing and filled in a lot of what he thought of as missing vertebrae.
Now, did he base that on an existing pliosaur?
No, he based that on let me get to the actual bit, because this is also, I can quote directly from a paper that has a phenomenal name as well. That a lot of this is taken from the PhD dissertation of Colin McHenry from 2009. It's called Devourer of Gods, the Paleoecology of the Cretaceous Pliosaur Kronosaurus Queenslandicus.
Cool.
That kicks ass.
Doesn't it? Yeah, so in Romer's paper about the mounting of it, he says the specimens had been entombed in an articulated state, dorsal surface up, in a limestone matrix. In recent times, however, the skeleton has been subject to erosion so that it consisted essentially of a series of limestone nodules, freed from the underlying strata and nearly complete, buried in the soil. Skull, neck, and trunk and part of the tail were contained in a linear series of 15 nodules of varied size. Of these, the first had been displaced and overturned. The others, however, appear to have undergone little or no displacement. Erosion had destroyed much of the outer parts of the nodules so that, for example, most of the superficial bones of the skull had been destroyed. Part or all of the neural spines had vanished, and the girdles, ribs, and abdominal armor were incomplete. Erosion had, further, destroyed some of the contacts between successive blocks. But because of their seemingly undisturbed position, interpolation of materials once filling the gaps can be made with considerable confidence. No trace of the pectoral limbs were preserved. The pelvic limbs were present in normal articulation, extending out on either side of the block containing the pelvic region. But even the femora were badly weathered, and the more distal regions of the flippers were poorly preserved. So basically, he interpreted that the separation of these blocks was an absence of fossil material in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And this led to the MCZ Kronosaurus mount having approximately 11 restored missing vertebrae.
Okay.
McHenry suggests that based on, and essentially, like, if you cut out those 11 vertebrae, you are now within the ballpark of a reasonable pliosaur.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of, it seems that there could actually be 1 or 2 missing vertebrae in the cervicals. That first block that he mentioned that had been dislodged and moved, does seem to be possibly a valid thing. Yeah, it's given the variable vertebral counts in other brachiocheniid specimens listed above, the most parsimonious interpretation of MCZ 1285 is specimen, as preserved, is missing at least 1 and perhaps 2 cervical vertebrae, but is missing no more than 1 dorsal vertebrae and possibly missing none. And so basically, this shrinks our Kronosaurus by about 10 feet. McHenry continues to say, although not as large as initially reconstructed, MCZ 1285 nevertheless represents a large individual with a total length of about 10.5 to almost 9 meters and a body mass of 10.6 to 12.1 tons.
That's a big boy.
It's a huge boy. It's absolutely gigantic. It seems like this is near the upper end of what we get for Kronosaurus. That one that I mentioned earlier that had just the middle chunk of the skull seems to possibly be bigger, but it's hard to say because a lot of size comparisons between material doesn't take into account the Harvard specimen because of the main issue with the Harvard specimen, in that not only are there infilled non-existent vertebrae, but the stuff that we have is very bad and has been covered in plaster and paint. And I haven't gotten a specific confirmation that this was the reason for this, but after the MCZ and the HMNH, rather, I guess, got this check for $10,000 to mount to prep and mount the Kronosaurus, they wanted to make this look really good. And because they already knew that they were missing so many vertebrae, and because the vertebrae that they had, as mentioned, are very weathered. I've seen some of the stuff from the same individual that's in our collections. It's bad. All the surface bone is gone. It's all honeycomb. It's really, really in rough shape.
Jeez.
So it seems like they had the idea of like, all right, if we're already making these very nice looking missing vertebrae, why don't we just reconstruct the bits of the vertebrae that are there and cover over the exposed internal bone with plaster and paint to mimic what the surface bone texture would have looked like. So this has led to the
and this was not uncommon practice either.
This was not uncommon practice. But this was it was and I believe still remains the most complete Kronosaurus specimen known. And it is, so a while back, when we were doing some condition reports on a lot of the specimens in Romer Hall, we got to crawl around Chrono and stuff and take some fun pictures in the skull and everything. And that's where my profile pictures taken. We also, that skull is so big, it's like 9.5 feet long. It's huge. It's gigantic. It's so big.
It's so big.
We were
Could
able to
swallow a human being in one bite.
Not just a whole human being. Alex, we have a group photo of the entire vertebrate paleontology team in its jaws at the same time.
That's so cool.
It's so cool. I'll throw it up on screen. Cool. It's great.
That's amazing.
It's a bonkers animal, and the skull is relatively on par with what we think it should be.
Size-wise, you mean, yes.
Yeah, size-wise. But it's an absolutely insane animal. And there are bits that you can see are like a little bit rougher or a little bit smoother that you're just like, oh, that's real fossil. Oh, that's bone. Oh, that's plaster. But then you have to remember that a lot of these are just bits of plaster that were covered over. So it's like how many and which of the pieces have bone in them is the question.
Sure.
And it's really hard because one, wow, this is one of the most solid exhibit mounts I've ever seen. This thing, it is, those bones are in there. And two, it's real big. It's not going to fit in that many CT scanners.
Mhm.
So we are.
Has Harvard considered dismantling the MCZ and instead of the MCZ building an enormous CT scanner that gives the entire city of Boston cancer, but is able to determine
Hey.
what if this animal is real?
Rest assured, I can't share too much about this right now, but we are working on methodologies to determine what is bone and what is not in our, again, problematic king Kronosaurus. And like finally put to rest like what we have. And I do think it's also interesting because like we have it's a good chunk of the skeleton. I've seen anywhere between like estimates anywhere between 60 to 75% of the skeleton. And I think it's really funny that like I bet that a lot of those estimates were made when they thought that they were missing 11 vertebrae. So it's probably a bit higher.
Yeah.
Of what we actually have. So it's relatively complete. It's a really, really cool specimen, and I'd highly recommend people come and see it. With all of this business of the Plasterosaurus said and done, there's one sad bit that I want to end on and one happy bit. Namely, that one of the sad things about Kronosaurus ending up at Harvard is that Longman was never able to see.
Oh, that's too bad.
He inquired and hinted several times throughout the last bit of his life that he wanted to try to come see it during preparation, and unfortunately a world war happened and that wasn't able to happen. And it wasn't meant to be.
A world war?
World War was declared.
Actually, to add a little bit more insult to injury on Longman, when the specimen was fully put on display, his name was not mentioned at all.
Of course.
It seems that in the years intervening that his contributions had been forgotten, which is such a shame, especially like he never even left Australia. Like he wasn't able to see this species that he named shown in its best light and had his contributions breezed over. This has since very much been corrected as we are talking about him today, but it's unfortunate. I would have loved it if he was able to actually, like, after the war, come to Harvard and actually see it all put together.
That is such a shame.
Well,
yeah.
Sad to hear it.
The specific
now that
see it all spackled over in the landlord special of fossil exhibit prep jobs.
Oh, it really, James.
What?
James, you've given me the title for the talk I'm eventually going to give on this.
The landlord special.
That's
landlord.
Great.
So good.
Well, you know, one thing to be said is that the specific epithet of Eiectus is Longmanai. And so perhaps there is a world in which powers convene in the ICZN rules, and if the Harvard specimen is a different species than Queenslandicus, we might end up with a Kronosaurus Longmanai.
I think that would be
cool.
A lovely
full
idea.
Circle. A little homage.
That would be fantastic. What a wonderful way to honor somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Hint, hint.
So,
and if you find something, name it after us.
There you go.
We can't. It's bad. Apparently bad taste to do it for yourself. So
yeah,
right.
Which I don't know.
But it's not bad taste to plead.
Yeah,
no, not at all. But the other thing that is a little bit of a silver lining on this is that who was able to actually see it, mounted on display and everything, was William Thomas, the landowner who discovered it in the first place.
Cool.
Cool.
They brought him to Harvard when he was 93 with his family to see, as he called it, his dinosaur in person for the first time, all mounted up. To which he also got to have a lovely reunion with William Cheville, the leader of that portion of the excavation. And both of them thought the other one was dead.
That's awesome.
That's some classic old man energy right there.
But that brings Kronosaurus to the modern day, where we are now. And I will cede the floor for someone else to speak.
All right. Well, we could do Phylogenum. We could do ecology. We could do stupid taxonomy. What do people want to do?
You know what? Let's do Phylogenum. I've mentioned Pliosaurs a bunch. I've mentioned Brachychieridae.
Good name.
A bunch.
That is a great name.
It's not as good as what is it?
Brachychenidae. There we go.
Wait, what's the larger group name? Thalassofonia.
The ocean murderers.
Yeah. All right.
That's a good name.
Now, ladies and gents, we're not talking about a dinosaur today. We're not talking about this. We're talking about this. And this being Sauropterygians. So if you are a viewer of our channel or a nerd or dweeb of dinosaur flavor, you're probably aware of marine reptiles. There are several flavors of marine reptiles and several separate radiations of marine reptiles. We have things like mosasaurs, big wet lizards. There are big sea turtles. There are ichthyosaurs, which are kind of the reptile answer to what if a dolphin was a reptile and also definitely dumber. All sorts of good stuff. But I don't want to say the most diverse, but one incredibly diverse group of Mesozoic marine reptiles are the Sauropterygians. In the Triassic, weird, diverse, but by the time we get to the Jurassic, there's been a mass extinction, and we're left with just the plesiosaurs. And these have traditionally been split in two major directions, plesiosaur, pliosaur. As we've discussed in prior videos, the historical distinction here is one has a short neck, one has a long neck, but long neck groups evolve short necks, short neck groups evolve long necks, and then evolve short necks again. It's a bit of a mess. Fortunately for us, Kronosaurus is a true blue pliosaur. It is a short-necked plesiosaur, big, long snout. So we've talked about another pliosaur in this game, actually. I think this is the last one. We already talked about Liopleurodon, right?
Yeah, this is the last one.
Okay, so
last of the three.
Early pliosaurs, like Attenborosaurus, which you've also talked about, were long-necked. As you move in, as the group evolves, the neck gets short, and we have the Brachychenidae. Why can't I say this? Oh god,
it's a weird name.
Do I have a tapeworm in my brain? Anyway, these are characterized by a short, the reduction of the length of the neck. Liopleurodon is a member of this group, and then we have more and more derived into bigger murder machines. Including the Thalassophonia, which is a cool name. Yes.
Actually, Alex,
is Liopleurodon also
It's other way around. Liopleurodon is a
Thalassophonia is the more inclusive group, right?
But it is not a brachychene.
My bad. Switch it.
Yeah.
Uno reverse. The more inclusive group is the group with the cool name, which means ocean murderer, and the name that means short neck is the one that does not include Liopleurodon. That's basically it. It's not a particularly diverse group. I don't think there's a lot of smaller named groups within it. They are fairly well distributed. They peter out at about the middle. I think the latest one we have is Middle Cretaceous, so like 90-ish million years ago. They go extinct before mosasaurs come on the scene. Maybe that's why mosasaurs do so well. I don't know. But they're, I don't want to say globally distributed, but I think they do pretty well. We have them in South America, Australia, Europe, definitely. I think they're North America too.
Yeah, Macrocephalosaurus and Brachiochenius specifically are both North American.
So yeah, unsurprisingly, enormous pelagic ocean animal is widely distributed.
Oh, and there's one from Russia. Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah. Something that's cool about derived plesiosaurs, including Kronosaurus, and I think is actually visible on the Harvard specimen, are their internal nares, which I'm going to talk about because it's neat.
Oh, I got up close and personal with those. They are very present.
So in very early Sauropterygians, the openings on the roof of the mouth, the internal nares that connect with the nasal passageway, are in the front, like turtles and lizards and most dinosaurs. However, more derived plesiosaurs, including things like elasmosaurs, but also pliosaurs like Kronosaurus, they're way back in the mouth like a crocodile, or more like a mammal. And I think that this is probably ecological. Even though there are many marine species that don't have a secondary palate like this, it does seem to be something that arises in aquatic and marine groups, so I wouldn't be shocked if that's what it turns out to be. For a long time, it was not clear what they were, and openings for the what might be salt glands more anteriorly on the snout were interpreted as the internal nares, but I think there's compelling evidence that this is not the case. Another cool feature of pliosaurs, and this will lead us into ecology, everybody. So their nares are retracted along the face, and their premaxilla are quite long, and this is evidence of a wading bird-like ecology.
You're right, because the aquatic in aquatic mosasaurs, the nares are retracted, but it's not that far, and it's not the premax that's lengthening.
Also, all of the wading heron-like crocodilians that we've studied. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the nares aren't retracted.
Well, Phytosaurus.
Phytosaurs were the herons.
Yeah,
Yes.
good catch there. Yeah. This, I don't know if we're cutting this. I can explain what I mean by this, but what I mean by this, viewers, is that there are different ways to make a long snout, and there are things called developmental constraints, which is really just means that some systems develop before other systems as an organism develops, and will shape and direct the formation of other things. So, for example, soft tissues like the narial passageways are taking shape and setting up their position before bones ossify around them. So, for an example, and Amelia brought this up earlier, so something like a gharial, they have very long snouts for catching prey, but their nares, their nose holes are at the very tip, and that is because they're not stretching their premaxilla out. That snout is almost all maxilla. The same goes for a lot of thalattosuchians too. But in things like Kronosaurus and things like Phytosaurs and things like Spinosaurs, the premaxilla is forming a pretty substantial part of that elongated snout, and that means that the nares are forming farther back. Well, the nares are forming first farther back, but those are the borders that dictate that development, and maybe are not an ecological signal. But that's just me. Anyway,
maybe not.
Well, it's like basically what's happening is there are two possible ways to, because the nares or the bony openings for the nostrils are always surrounded because of homology, because everybody with bones is related. There's only two ways you can move the nostrils because it's always surrounded by the same bones. You can either stretch the bone in front of the nose, or you can stretch the bone that the nose is in.
Exactly.
And or to lengthen the nose, basically. So there's two ways to do it, and the two ways have different consequences. If you're stretching that first bone, the premaxilla, you're pushing the nostrils back because the nostrils are always behind that bone. If you're stretching the maxilla, or the second bone, then what you're doing is stretching out the face in the middle, and so you're not necessarily pushing back the start of the nostril. So in something like a mosasaur, they're still starting at that contact between the premax and the maxilla. And what's happening to push them back is more so the maxilla is lengthening. In some of the more derived things like Pilosaurs, they're also stretching the premax, and so it's contributing to that. But it's not the same level of extreme lengthening that you're going to get in these things or in Phytosaurs.
And literally all birds.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But you don't have to stretch the nares if you elongate the maxilla, though, right? Crocodilians do have a terminal nares, but that's what's happening is you're getting all of the elongation behind the nostrils.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I guess I would say, to amend your statement, like, you could do it three ways. You could stretch it, like, you could stretch the front, you could stretch kind of the area where the nostrils exist, or you could stretch fully behind. But stretching fully behind, to my knowledge, is not that common.
No.
You mean maxillary elongation?
Like, completely retronarial elongation. Like a croc-style thing where the nares itself is quite small and remains
that's
anterior.
pretty rare. Yeah, no, it's like stuff
right.
like Gavialis and I think Crocodilus johnstonii are pretty notable exceptions. And things like pliosaurs, it's kind of a little of both, which is cool.
Well, I'm thinking about like whales too. Like because whales are messed up. I don't know what's actually pushing it back, but what is happening is the bone in front of the nostril is moving, is stretched, and that's why the blowhole is back on top of their head.
It's both. I think it is both relative shortening of the region behind the nostril and relative elongation in front, because they've got extreme telescoping, which we've talked about in prior videos, where you're essentially compressing the forehead, so you're making it that more of your head is like snout, but then because you're also like hyper developing the premax, where the front of the head winds up being way further forward than it should be if you're like kind of centering yourself as a reference point on the nares.
I'm remembering Jimbo and I looking at, not even looking at, being told what the bones of the skull, I think, of a right whale are by Christian Kammer, cool guy. And he's like, so those are the palatines, and they're not where those bones are supposed to be. And I didn't like it.
Well, I think the phrase he used, which upset you, was "these bones are considered homologous to the palatines."
Yes, I didn't like that. What do you mean?
What do you mean considered?
What did he mean by that?
What did Christian mean by this?
Anyway, it's cool stuff.
I looked up a whale skull, and the frontal is on the side of the head. That's so bad.
Whale skulls are profoundly demolished.
Amelia, you've accidentally witnessed the whale skull. You need to be euthanized now. It's for your own good.
I accept this is bad.
I had never thought about it, and I've seen whale skulls before, but like looking at that one and just kind of like staring at it for 2 seconds, I was just like, oh my god, its eyes are in little tubes on the side of its face. This is so stupid.
The skull is wrapped around behind the eye.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I had 2 of those in my lab for a while, and it took us a minute to actually figure out what they were. When we first got the pictures of them, we thought that they were part of a mammoth pelvis, and we brought them down there, and we were like, "What the hell are these? They're way too big. They're way too thick. What's going on here?" And then our mammologist walked by. I was just like, "Oh, you got a whale skull." Like, what do you mean?
Nightmare.
Like, oh yeah, those are the skulls.
Nightmare.
What do you mean? And we walked up into the exhibits, and we did a comparative zoology, and we looked at it. We're like, oh, that's it. Oh God, heinous. It's so weird.
TF'd.
Sorry. Continue.
I TF'd comparative anatomy last year in the spring, and in one of the labs we had, it was like the skull lab. And we had a porpoise skull, and that was my favorite one to show the students. It's like, hey, the like one of the tasks of the station was like, point out where you think the eye is, and everyone was like, is it here? I'm like, no, it's you'd be right for thinking it should be there, but no.
Why?
I mean, we're reptile people, so like mammal skulls in general are weird and foreign to us and upsetting. But like, there's stuff like whales. And I think anteaters are the things that like I don't much care for those, Dalton. They insist upon this.
Why the thing that made me yell? Why is this label of the vomer behind the palatine and the pterygoid?
Why indeed?
Okay.
I think the phrase "considered homologous to the palatine" is probably conveying much meaning here. That's not a good phrase to hear, you know?
Nah.
Is it homologous? Well, it's considered homologous.
Considered homologous.
We love it, folks. We love it. But anyway, that was supposed to be a transition into discussing the ecology and friends of Kronosaurus, or perhaps more appropriately, foes.
Or food. A lot of food.
I think the things I would eat would consider me their foe.
Yeah. But Alex, are you the foe of the cow, of the burger that you eat? Or do you simply not consider it?
I try not to because I like cows and it makes me sad.
Oh, there you go. Well, maybe Kronosaurus was like this. Maybe at least the game one is like that because he looks very polite.
He does.
For such an absolute monster of an animal. Like, it's a very reasonable looking critter. And it looks like it has a little smile.
One of the skins, they give it like the little dots above the eyes like some dogs have.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the best possible thing.
That was
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
So, Kronosaurus, we've talked about the diet and ecology of pliosaurs before, mostly in the Leopleurodon episode where he talked about how, golly gee, they get a lot of squid beaks in their stomach contents. What does this mean? Maybe they were specialists in squid, or maybe it would basically reptilian smaller sperm whales, or maybe it's just that the beaks of squid are harder and they have a tendency of sticking around for longer and accumulating more prominently in the gut contents. So we have a couple of specimens of some unfortunate friends of Kronosaurus that were on the business end of that giant, horrifying, snappy snout thing. And on the business end of their absolutely insane bite force, which has been estimated to be around the same as T-Rex. So
80 million.
88 million.
88 million newtons. Thank you for remembering.
So there's a skull of an elasmosaur that they don't give a confident species delineation to, but what?
The diagnosis just says victim.
They provisionally call it Woolungosaurus. And I'll throw a picture of it in chat. What's really, really funny is that the paper almost has a jump scare to it. Here is side A. It's like, oh, plesiosaur skull. Neat.
I've seen these before. Normal.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Here is side B.
Ooh.
Can you see the injuries?
Oh my god.
Emotional. Damn.
It's been
A lot of
hard.
physical damage too.
That's tough.
That's a bad way to go.
Well, are we sure it's dead? Those. What if?
What if it lived?
So there is another paper that describes a marine reptile that also possibly got bit by a Kronosaurus. And that is a smaller Kronosaurus.
Oh.
So it is. It's so appropriate.
Kronosaurus devouring his son.
Has anyone made art of this?
No! No one has.
All right.
I'm
all right.
so fan art.
All
Now.
right, paleo art community.
Yeah.
No one. I don't need to see your reconstruction of a lizard no one gives a shit about from a dennery. Do something cool.
Potensis.
Do this.
Yeah. So it's let's see. Where's the specific bit? Yeah. The spacing on the puncture marks in QMF11060 and QMF51 to 91 correspond to the wide tooth positions of the jaws of Kronosaurus.
Cool.
They do
Cool.
specifically say that in contrast to the pattern, the pathology area is relatively small. So it isn't as there are craters in the skull where there used to not be craters, like on that poor elasmosaur there. and also on the shells of some ammonites that have been hypothesized to also get on the bad side of this guy. But yeah, Kronosaurus ate a lot of stuff, including possibly, almost certainly actually, smaller Kronosaurus.
Now consider, if you will, what if I'm a miserable, joyless person and would say, actually, we can't be certain that was Kronosaurus. What if it were another pliosaur?
It could be another pliosaur.
Are there other pliosaurs that lived in the area?
Well, boy, howdy. Depends on who you ask.
No! It's taxonomy pedantry time.
Thank you. For...
Yes.
Whoa!
Oh no!
Whoa!
Oh!
James is locked in. It's time.
It's time to be joyless. Actually, no. Here, I'm going to be joyful. So if you've been watching this video and you've been bursting at the seams, just kind of vibrating, trying to keep it in, just like they're calling it Kronosaurus, but they should be calling it Eiectus.
No, we should go outside, make friends.
Yes.
This is not a good way to live.
I'm gonna summarize this all. I'm probably gonna oversimplify it a little bit, but I think that's okay. Basically, there's a bunch of fossils apparently that should be considered Kronosaurus, or that have been considered Kronosaurus. And one of the things that I've heard, and by I've heard, I mean other people have heard because it's been said in literature, is that there's a lot of Kronosaurus material at the Queensland Museum that's been like awaiting description. According to people who have looked for it, no, there is not. I don't know if it's been lost. I don't know if it's mistaken. I don't know if that was like somebody confusing the specimens that ultimately went to Harvard for specimens that would stay in Queensland. I don't really know. There's a lot mistakes get made. I'm not like,
these things happen.
To be very clear, we're not accusing anybody of malfeasance here, right? Like no. This is a mistake. There comes a time in everybody's taxonomic work where you need to contend with the fact that a lot of these old names are not based on incredibly good specimens, right? There's kind of two extremes for old paleo. I have not found a lot of things that are in the middle. They're either the most beautiful specimen you've ever seen, or they're nothing. Like, you know, like nowadays, there's a bunch of taxa where it's, you know, it's like 20 bones from throughout the skeleton. That's cool. With all these things, it's like a scrap of bone that you could not possibly ever justify as belonging to the animal you think it belongs to, or it's the whole thing. There's very little in between. So, Kronosaurus, the holotype of Kronosaurus, is not very much. Scott, I forget. Did you share the holotype of Kronosaurus?
He did, yes.
I did, yes.
So you can see, we'll show it on screen again. It is not much. It has been noted in the literature for a long time that the type material for Kronosaurus is not very good. And this sets a taxon up to be something that we have, I believe, covered before, called a nomen dubium. And a nomen dubium is Latin for a dubious name. This is kind of a broad categorization of things. A nomen dubium is basically whenever you have reason to believe that you are unable to apply a species name to a fossil. A lot of people think that the only way that you can get a nomen dubium is if the type material is not diagnostic. That's not necessarily the case. There are other ways you can have one. The specific case we're dealing with here, it can be referred to by a more strict term called a nomen vanum, which is an empty name. And so it's been widely recognized for some time that Kronosaurus queenslandicus is a nomen vanum. The type material is not sufficient to anchor the species. Now, the wonderful thesis that Scott has been like referencing a lot as like a huge major piece of scholarship on Kronosaurus did say, listen, we're aware of these issues and somebody should designate a neotype, which I'll get back to in a second. But based on all of the available fossil material from this region of Australia in these stratigraphic units and everything that's been considered to be Kronosaurus queenslandicus, there doesn't seem to be evidence of another taxon. And so while the type material is not really diagnostic and that does need to be fixed, at the very least he was confident that it's all probably the same thing, even if it needs a better definition and type diagnosis, which is a reasonable place for things to stop for a little while. They shouldn't stay there. You should eventually, like, all taxa should be diagnosed properly so that you can identify things as belonging to them. But at this point, it doesn't seem that it was causing anybody like particular problem. Now, a few years ago now, a team of researchers decided that the type situation with Kronosaurus was not going to stand any longer. And so they did some taxonomic revision. And what they said is the type material is not very good, and the only thing that you can say belongs to the type species ever would be the type specimen, which by definition has to belong to that species, if that species exists. Right? To be clear for everybody, species are erected based on reference specimens. The holotype, or the like name-bearing single individual specimen, is by definition a member of that species if it's real. That's the only one that can't become something else unless the entire species is a synonym of another species.
Yes.
Right? So here's an example, like just to make sure this is clear. Edmontosaurus. Right? So
Sure, I'll take your word for it.
Right. Anatotitan was erected based on a couple of specimens. If Anatotitan were a distinct species, the holotype of Anatotitan would have to, by definition, belong to that genus and species. Even if it turned out that some specimens that we had identified as Anatotitan actually were Edmontosaurus. The reason Anatotitan is not valid anymore is because it was determined that everything that had ever been called Anatotitan was actually the same as Edmontosaurus. And so that's why we only use Edmontosaurus now. So the holotype can kind of retain its name unless you can demonstrate that it belongs to something else. But when you have a very bad holotype and you can't reference other specimens and identify them against it, that's a bad situation. And what's happening here is the holotype's not very good quality. There's no way to look at another specimen and identify apomorphic traits that diagnose a new specimen as being Kronosaurus. And therefore, the only thing we could ever say as Kronosaurus is the type that the name is attached to. Therefore, Kronosaurus was declared to be a nomen dubium, which was known, or a nomen vanum, right? Which is a case of being a nomen dubium, essentially. So they said, we're going to need to erect new taxa here. So they decided that the best way to solve this situation is to say, we're not going to use the name Kronosaurus queenslandicus anymore. We're going to erect new names. I forget one of them, but the one that they erected to contain the Harvard specimen, which is the most kind of widely visible specimen attributed to Kronosaurus previously, is Eiectus, which means essentially like castaway, right? Or seafarer.
What language is that?
Like,
it's Latin.
Good, because I want to make a joke that it sounds like something that one of the Three Stooges would say after he gets hit. Eiectus.
What was the other taxon? It was Eiectus and something else.
Moncurosaurus.
Okay, Moncurosaurus.
and that one's the only one that wasn't found in Australia.
Yeah, that's the South
That one's
American.
from Colombia.
So did they transfer all of the Australian material to Eiectus?
All but the holotype of Kronosaurus.
Well, that's also very interesting because it also has been noticed that the Kronosaurus material seems to span a pretty wide range of geologic time. And so I find it interesting that they didn't break that up into more chronologically restricted species. Not that that would be good reason to do so, but I'm kind of that's action that's often taken.
More like chronologically.
Oh.
Absolute king. We love him, folks.
It's funny because it's the root word.
That's why it's funny. So there's a reason that paleontologists in general haven't really adopted the use of Eiectus, and that is that this was not, strictly speaking, the correct taxonomic action. A little while ago, I referenced longer ago because we've had discussions amongst ourselves that have been cut in the magic of video editing.
Don't let them see the man behind the curtain.
Right. No, we don't
The
cut
magic
anything.
of film.
When we all jump like that, that's just what we all did at that moment.
When Alex shrinks to 10% of his screen.
Their body just did that.
Yeah. Yeah. What if their body just does that? A neotype is a kind of specimen that can be elected and by action of ICCN selected to replace a type specimen that is deemed insufficient. I think that the fact that neotype designation is an encouraged taxonomic action should probably be wider knowledge within our paleo community, because it's quite common nowadays to see revisions where these historical taxa are kind of dismantled with the material all assigned to different new taxa that the authors codify and name in that paper. There are cases where that action is justified. Like, say you really look at a group of specimens, like say you looked at all the Kronosaurus stuff and you could say, actually, this is an equality thing. These are just all clearly not the same species. Then it would be the right thing to do to start naming new species to contain all the new species you've detected. But if you're saying the holotype of Kronosaurus queenslandicus isn't very good, I must name a bunch of new species now to deal with that. Well, you don't have to. What you could do is petition the ICZN and make an explicit case that, hey, this holotype is not good enough to be a reference specimen. We're going to choose a good specimen, the Harvard specimen probably, as a neotype. And that will be approved by the Commission on Zoological Nomenclature, and then that specimen will be the name-bearing type. It will be labeled a neotype, but it will be the official reference specimen that the species and genus are based on.
Yeah.
This is what happened with Allosaurus, right? The Allosaurus type material is like a couple of fragmentary bones. I think the best thing is a really, really crappy caudal vertebra.
There's a bit of a femur.
Right. I mean, there's a little bit, but it was not enough to be Allosaurus.
It's bad.
Right. And so the reference specimen for Allosaurus had long kind of unofficially been the Smithsonian specimen. I forget the specimen number offhand.
I don't remember.
That was recently approved to be the neotype specimen. And so now the name Allosaurus is officially anchored to that Allosaurus at the Smithsonian Museum in the US. Right.
The coolest part about a neotype, in my opinion, is that they actually know how to do kung fu.
They're the one.
Yeah, well, they learned it.
They are the
quickly.
one. Yes.
And the thing I want to add to that is the reason that it's something that I'm considering pursuing in the future for a lot of the seaway mosasaurs, because a lot of them, being Bone Wars taxa, are based on individual bones. They're very scrappy, but for the past 100 years, people who have been researching them have developed a concept of what each of these things are. So the best example of this is Clidastes. The genotype, the original Clidastes, is a single vertebra that's arguably barely diagnosable as even Clidastes is how we conceptualize it now. But if you ask anybody right now working on Clidastes, we know what it is. I can tell you what it is. And within that, I can tell you what the different species are. Not that any of them, except for one, have a reliable holotype, but we still understand that these things are different, whether or not there's a holotype that's good. And usually, informally, a neotype happens, not formally, but it's the people working on a group of animals will have a specimen that they always reference. And ultimately, usually that's the one that if someone wants to go through with the ICZN stuff, can petition for the neotype, because everybody's already using it. Everybody's already referencing it. So all the new specimens and all the new identifications are already based on that thing. And so moving forward, for consistency's sake, for reducing the amount of headaches that people have to deal with in reviewing the literature, in erecting a neotype and keeping the historic name, you're keeping everything consistent with what people have already been doing.
Yeah.
And I think from an outside perspective of not working on plesiosaurs, I imagine that's a contributing factor to this as well, is that everyone who's been working on plesiosaurs has been using Kronosaurus for this group of specimens that is distinct in their eyes.
Yes,
there's just no
right. They have.
Yeah. So in that's why the name hasn't been adopted, because they're okay, maybe that one's Eiectus, but everything else is still Kronosaurus, because we've been calling it that for 20 years, and it is, to our knowledge, consistent with a holotype, even if the holotype is not diagnostic on its own per se.
And I think there was probably good reason, and I'm not well versed with plesiosaur and pliosaur anatomy. There's probably good reason to go in with some skepticism and reevaluate the Columbian material of hey, is this actually referable to Kronosaurus queenslandicus? Is it a different species of Kronosaurus? Is it a different thing entirely? Was it just referred to Kronosaurus? because it's a big pliosaur, because it is a huge pliosaur. It's really cool. And like, I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. And I think it's also a worthwhile endeavor to recognize, hey, like the Kronosaurus queenslandicus holotype is not diagnostic. But yeah, given that there isn't outside of like the Columbian material, I don't think that there's really like a tremendous amount of material that has been assigned to Kronosaurus, like outside of what we've discussed in the video. And like the like workers around the world have been and historically have been more or less using like the Harvard specimen as like a guide, and we have the Kronosaurus, and kind of this is what we conceptualize as it. And yes, there was this Columbian species that was rightfully split, and it is distinct and different. But probably the move should be then to just give Kronosaurus a neotype, because it's what everyone recognizes.
Right. And this is not just the best, like, in our opinion, this is explicitly what the ICZN says should be done when you are trying to maintain prevailing usage. And like prevailing usage is a kind of slippery zone, but in something that's as charismatic and well known as Kronosaurus, I think it becomes important. Like, here's an example this is not a teaser of any of my upcoming research, to be very clear. Okay.
Let him be clear.
The T-Rex holotype is not a lot of a skeleton. It's, there's representation throughout the postcranial skeleton. There's a few ribs, some vertebrae, a leg, or I think parts of both legs. Verts. There's a left maxilla, the right and left lacrimal, the left squamosal, the left ectopterygoid, and the right and left dentaries, and the left syrangular. So that's skull material, but not an extremely large amount of skull material. Forelimbs aren't present. Most of the rest of the body is not present. It's not a complete skull. What would happen if in my research I said, hey, bad news. All of these bones that are actually preserved in the T-Rex holotype are not distinguishable from what we now know are other tyrannosaurs? Would the right answer be for me to rename what T-Rex is supposed to be on a new specimen and then throw out a lot of other research? Or would the best answer be for me to say, you know how everybody uses Sue the T-Rex as the reference for what T-Rex is? In that case, I would probably make Sue or another really, really good specimen. HMNH 5027 would be a contender, but it's not nearly as complete. I would make one of those the neotype, because it is better for scientific communication to retain the name, but based on a different specimen, than it would be for me to just say like, oh boy, gee golly gee, I now get to name the new thing that's going to replace what T-Rex is.
Yeah. And
in most cases where neotypes have not been named, it's not for things that are that charismatic. And so I think the decision to just name new taxa to kind of sort out the mess is a little more justified. But I think in general, if a neotype can be erected, it should be.
Yeah. And when you mention like it to help with science communication, it should, I think, be said that we mean like it both helps with like SciComm kind of as we conceive of it, of like science relating to the public. That helps to have consistent nomenclature. But even probably more importantly in this case, it's communication across the scientific literature, like between papers, one another. That way you don't have like a backlog of 50, 100 years of tons and tons of papers referring to something as X, and then suddenly you're like, oh no, it has to be Y.
Well, papers and also like specimens in drawers in museums. Like if this was an animal, like using Cladastes as an example, if I decided I wanted to rename Cladastes and everything referred to it, I don't think any of the labels would change. I don't think anyone would stop calling it that.
They wouldn't. It's something that in a lot of museum collections, it is something that is assumed to be something. Let me rephrase this. In a lot of museum collections, they don't update the names of things super frequently because it is assumed that the researchers who are going to want to look at it are the ones who are going to know enough about the taxonomic history to be up to date on what is changing. I remember back at Michigan, I saw once some hadrosaur fossils that were still labeled as Trachodon.
Yeah.
Cool. And I remember bringing it up to our collections manager and was just like, hey, so like, if we update every single thing every time a new paper comes out, as we've talked before, like just because a new phylogeny that that shows that some things might be this and some things might be that. That doesn't. It's not set in stone. These things are always changing. Look at Brontosaurus. If everyone everyone changed their labels back to Apatosaurus, and now a lot of them are out of date again for the second time.
Yeah, and at least for me working on the Seaway ones, like the thing that I really like it when they have the old names on a lot of these things. Like even if it's just one tooth or one jaw or whatever, like sometimes the material that is preserved in these holotypes is pretty good. And in the back of my mind, I want to know if one day I figure out or someone else figures out that there's a group of animals that is in fact different and there's already a holotype, I want to attribute that name to whoever actually first picked up on it, and then someone else thought, again, coming back to Cladastes, like we have, I don't know, half a dozen or more Cladastes holotypes in the HMNH collections of various cool names, and at Yale too. Yale has, is it Adestosaurus is an old name for Cladastes? Cool. It's Adestosaurus rex, and it's one of my favorite
good one.
Invalid mosasaur names ever. But it's just like, man, it's cool to know that there'd be a fun name to have if one day someone figures out that that's actually unique. And it is, in my opinion, best to retain that. Like someone did the work, someone noticed something and named it. It's only fair to credit them if one day, 100 years from now, someone figures out that they're actually different and there is already a holotype.
I will also just quickly say, this is why I know that like every museum keeps track of historical types. Like the plesiosaur that I worked on is a historical type. Plesiosaurus longirostris is no longer considered a valid species.
Longiros.
But it's a good name, Longirostris. But we have it in our database as like this was named the holotype of Plesiosaurus longirostris, which is no longer valid.
Yeah, and I do really like at the HMNH, it depends on the ones, but some of them have little notes with them, like either from other researchers that have gone through and said, oh, this is this now, or like whenever the collection was last updated, they'll have like in parentheses what it's called today, which is also helpful. Like if you're, familiar with the group, but maybe not familiar enough with that subgroup to know what the deal is with these historic holotypes.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to say anything about Kronosaurus before we wrap it up? About how it looks, all that stuff.
That is pretty friggin' sweet.
It's a cool animal to have existed at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not here now.
I'm going to say something that might get me in a little bit of trouble, in a little bit of hot water. Much like the Middle Cretaceous sea was at the time.
The weird pivot.
I think pliosaurs are cooler than mosasaurs. I like mosasaurs. I think mosasaurs are cool critters, and they do give sea serpent a little more. But
sleep with one eye open, Alex.
There's just something so neat.
I just think they're neat.
Yeah, I just think they're neat.
So cool. So, does anybody have anything else to say about the look of this guy before we take it to the species viewer?
Like the design, or just like in general?
Yeah, the design.
Oh, I think it's awesome. I love him. I like that he eats the shark, but only half.
I think from looking through things, this is one of the most paleo accurate reconstructions of Kronosaurus I've seen. The more up-to-date skulls based on other pliosaurs fit in there absolutely perfectly. It definitely has it does not have the proportions of the Harvard mounted specimen, which is a good thing. It has the appropriate, like, much shorter torso, and it is a little bit of a longer tail, but I do think that is not bad. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely killer. And I also like the little fin that it has.
I just thought of an excellent thumbnail for this video.
What's up?
If we can get a shot of the Kronosaurus jumping and like grabbing a shark, would it be feasible to Photoshop a Foster's
Australian
hanging from the line?
Alex, this is going to be my mission.
Incredible! I'm so pleased.
to comment on Alex's earlier blasphemy, I think
You'll have to be more specific. What do you mean?
are very cool. No, like which one is cooler? I think the thing for me is they're cool in different ways. Mosasaurs to me, and the reason mosasaurs are interesting to me, like literally, but also like as a research subject, is like they're like pushing the boundaries of what a lizard can do, of like what you can do with this simple thing in theory. These are cool in the whale way of like, let's just mess everything up in the worst possible way and make it huge. And like, it's a great recipe for sea monsters, honestly. And a thing I may or may not have mentioned on the channel before is before I landed on mosasaurs, I was considering working on pliosaurs.
Cool.
Because I've always really
that Leopleurodon episode, yeah.
Yeah. It was Leopleurodon specifically, and like basically the reason I didn't is I didn't want to go to Britain. But
reasonable.
That's based.
It was just like I had foresight. It was like, if I want to work on these animals, I'm going to have to live in the UK, and I don't want to do that. So I didn't choose them. But no, I really, really like them. I wish there were more of them in the States, and I wish that we had like, I don't know, I wish we had better skulls and better skeletons and, you know, everything. The Sternberg Museum has the Megacephalosaurus like cast mounted when you walk in, and it's just absurd. It's so cool. It's very stupid looking.
It's actually kind of similar colors to this guy here with the yellow underbelly.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then back in the collections, they have the skull, and it's just absurd. This guy, I think, I'm torn because I think it's perfect. And I like it. I like all the colors. I like the little eyebrow dots. I think that's probably going to be what decides the ranking. Its face kind of looks like a duck, which I think is funny. Or it reminds me of like that really goofy early amniote thing in the Field Museum. What was that thing? You remember? We were looking at it and laughing at it. It had a really long face and it looked like a duck, and it was in the Permian case.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the name.
Yeah. I don't know either, but that's what this looks like to me. But in a good way, I guess. I don't know. I think it's cute and perfect. He's innocent. He can commit no crimes. It's got the little dots. I have to give it an H. It's fantastic. I love it.
Oh, okay. An H tier.
It's got the little dots like dogs do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, hey, absolutely no hate.
Time to hate.
I'm not going to hate it. No,
I was speaking for Alex. I'm kidding.
I like it a lot. I really, really like it. It feels like a fairly plausible animal. Like, I don't know nearly enough about pliosaur anatomy to do any nitty gritty analysis of the design, but like first pass, it looks completely reasonable, biologically informed, plausible, has verisimilitude. Those are usually the things that I like the most in these designs. I am a little bit torn. I can see an argument to put this in H.
It's so cool.
It's really, really good. And it is cute somehow despite its size. Yeah, I'm going to give this an H tier. I'm swayed. I was going to say I reserved that for little guys, but Kronosaurus is also there, and so
it's little guys unless they're in the water.
Well, and again, for me, it's the dots. Like, only cute dogs have dots, you know?
Like Saint Bernard.
Like Saint Bernards or Rottweilers or stuff, like with the, you know, not to say that dogs without the dots are not cute, but like, I tend to think the cutest dogs have little dots.
Yeah. So I love this. This is one of my favorite creatures in the game. I remember when they added this, and genuinely in the Vert Paleo workspace, like we all watched the trailer together and we were like, oh, it looks so good. Oh, that's the best it's ever looked. And it honestly really does, like James and Amelia commenting on like the cuteness of it. It kind of gives me similar feelings to like the big toothed whales, in the sense that like, I know that this is a powerful animal, but it also kind of feels like if one came up next to you on a kayak, it'd be fine.
Yeah,
A little bit.
I'm sure it'd be
it
friendly.
It wouldn't be. Like, let's put it this way. We talked at some episode in the past about the Chunkingosaurus that James named Tilikum. If SeaWorld existed and had one of these, there would be every SeaWorld would have a Tilikum.
Yeah, they would.
It's insane.
I'm really sorry. I know
And you
didn't,
get a Tilikum.
I know you didn't mean it this way, but just the way you phrase it. If SeaWorld existed, imagine a world.
Imagine a world.
SeaWorld
Imagine a world where animal cruelty exists. No,
Now
so
I'm sad.
I love this. I always end up putting it in my parks as like either the like black with the white spots on the back like it has here, or honestly this is one of the few ones in the game where I do the unpatterned because I kind of like the like white stripes on the side and just having it be a little bit minimal, but I always end up making it like dark colored. I mean, I do that with a lot of my marine reptiles, but it is gorgeous and one of the best reconstructions of Kronosaurus that you will find out there, and I am definitely, no question, giving it an H tier. H for Harvard.
Oh,
H
yeah.
cheer.
Let's go.
H for Harvard. There we go.
H for Harvard. He's our boy. Got a rep. It is funny. I've made a couple jokes in the past about like, hey, if we do like correct a bunch of the stuff about Kronosaurus, if we eventually like redo Romer Hall and stuff like that and fix it and like finally figure out everything about it and kind of redo a bunch of stuff, are we going to shrink the logo?
No.
It's like that's engraved in some glass on campus. Like,
Well, you might have
Is
to.
it my turn?
It's your turn, Alex.
it is your turn.
Cool. This is easy. This is a great design. I love this one. It's one of the best ones in the game. I like the little fluke. I love the colors on this. This is a high S. I maintain the purity of H tier, despite there being video evidence of me getting what I originally defined it as. But, you know, everyone makes a mistake happens once, and only little guys go in H tier from whenever I said that last. But this is excellent. High S, easy. Kick-ass design. I love him.
Alex is right. A mistake does only happen once. And the mistake was ever entertaining the idea that H tier is restricted to little guys. Because H means hero. and most heroes are big. See
Size.
Superman, see Big Hero 6. I don't know. The evidence seems to be on my side.
Isn't the hero in Big Hero 6 like a little kid?
He's a big robot that blows up like a big jelly.
No,
And he's a team.
the main character's name is Hero.
Yes, but he's not the big hero. He's the
I'll
little
be
hero.
honest, I do not remember a lot of that.
It's a good movie. It's such a good movie. I lost my train of thought completely. No, I love this design so much. This got so many great color patterns, so many fun behaviors. I love the social animation. I was so excited when they added this to the game because I was like, finally, I can have a pliosaur that isn't Attenborough technically being a pliosaur, and isn't the Leopleurodon that is just a monster. This is like great. When you look at it from the head on and you watch its flippers, it's just walking with dinosaurs.
It's beautiful.
It's so good. It also is friendly looking. Like there's a friendliness to its eyes and kind of it's a little smile and the eyebrow dots. They really
A softness.
There's a softness to it. There's just like one thing I noticed, and I'm going to make everyone else notice it now. And it's
Oh no!
it's just that the way that the jaw, this like wrinkle where the back of the skull meets the neck, kind of makes it look like it has a gill. But I don't hold that against it at all.
A little bit, yeah.
This is an H tier design for me, very easily, and I like to now imagine looking at it in lateral view. That photo of I forget what was the preparator's name.
Constance.
Yes,
Constance.
the photo of Constance. Because like the Harvard Kronosaurus may be too long, but if you just look at it from like the head to the first flipper, that gives you a great sense, and you can just imagine her standing right in there. It gives you a great sense of how big this thing is. Even when proportioned correctly, it's
Pretty fucking big.
so huge.
Kronosaurus. with our rankings, stands high and proud up in H tier with its fellow countryman Minmai.
They really went all out with the Australian dinosaurs and creatures.
Did we do Muttaburrasaurus yet?
We did.
Yeah.
Where did we put that?
Muttaburra's S.
Tight. And then we only have one left, right?
Yeah. We just have Australopinator. Well, it is now time to see if we get Australopinator when we
spin
that wheel. I would like to get Australopinator. I really like it.
That'd be very cool. Doesn't look like we are.
No. Okay. That was all right. Whatever.
Gallimimus
had to come up eventually. Gallimimus.
Back to Mongolia.
Now, you may be asking yourself, is this the name of a battlefield in Anatolia where many Australians died? No, that's Gallipoli. This is Gallimimus.
You really proud of that one?
I am. What?
Nothing.
No.
This is deep World War I history for all the World War I nerds in the chat.
I knew where you were going with this, and I was like, he's not going to, and then you did.
I did. But anyway, we'll talk about that next week.
We'll talk about
before we talk about
not the Battle of Gallipoli.
We could talk about Gallipoli. Anyway, we have patrons, and we're going to thank them now. So, here's the ones we're going to thank. Yes. We would like to thank all of our patrons for their incredibly generous support of the Skeleton Crew because, simply put, we could not do this without you guys. Right? We are all both full-time scientists, working paleontologists. I have COVID-induced brain fog, and I just felt a wrinkle in my brain smooth out as I said that.
How many times have you used COVID now?
It just went only twice. This is my second time.
That fog don't go away, comrade.
Oh, I know it don't. But regardless of my own COVID brain fog, we're all real paleontologists. This is not our full-time job here. We are doing content creation in addition to what we do because we think it's important for real scientists and real people in a field to be the ones who communicate that to the public as much as possible. We think this is something really important. But we can't just do it on our own. Our schedules are incredibly busy, and all of the support you guys give us, goes a long way in ensuring that we can still take the time to do this. And so for your support, we thank you. If you do like our videos, we encourage you to join the ranks of our esteemed patrons because that is the most direct way to support us. But just dropping likes on the videos, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already are also really good ways to support us in what we do. Without further ado, I would like to thank Benjamin Seepser, nickname, original username, Philip Fico, Christopher Bellis Jones, Aaron Anderson, Adamolos, Camphibia, Dan O'Kyrus, Dinodom, Griff, King Zashu, Kyrie Spangler, Max Ironpaw, Pythonic, Ryan Wants to Die, Swamp Ape Science, Wanderer, and Wheat.
It's okay, Ryan.
It's okay, Ryan. Please don't.
It's all right. It's all right, bud.
Yeah, so it'll be featured on the Skeleton Crew.
For your generous support of the Skeleton Crew. So thank you to our most generous patrons, and thank you again to all of our patrons for contributing all you do. Again, it means a lot to us, and we thank you all for it.
You guys are the real heroes.
We're going to wrap up this overly long recording session, and we will see you next time when we talk about Gallimimus.
A big turkey.
And my favorite flavored water, Volvic water from the UK.
Please get the case of that. And we'll,
wait, are you kidding?
It's VOLVIC.
Oh my God.
Bye-bye.
All right. We're wrapping the session. Goodbye, everybody.